Delia Washington was 52 years old when her doctor leaned across the examination table, dismissed every other person from the room, and whispered 4 words that rearranged everything Delia thought she knew about her own life. Don't drink the tea. The tea Raymond had been preparing for her every single morning for 3 years. The tea their neighbors praised him for. The tea Delia had been drinking while her hair fell out in the shower, while her hands went numb at the edges, while 3 different doctors told her this was simply what getting older felt like for a woman like her. Raymond had watched all of it. He had handed her that cup every morning, watched her drink it, and smiled. Delia drove home from that appointment and sat in her own driveway for 40 minutes. When she finally walked through that front door and Raymond looked up from the television and asked how the appointment went, she smiled and said fine. 5 days later, Raymond was arrested at his workplace in front of his entire department. But what came after the arrest? What Delia had already quietly set in motion. That's what truly destroyed him. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The iron hissed. Delia Washington dragged it slow across the collar of her uniform, watching the wrinkles surrender one by one. The kitchen clock read 5:14 a.m. Outside, the Georgia sky was still the color of a bruise, dark purple bleeding into gray at the edges, the sun not yet willing to commit. The neighborhood was silent. Even the birds hadn't started yet. But Delia was already in motion. She had been in motion for so long she wasn't sure she knew how to stop. The uniform was white with navy piping, the same style she'd worn for 28 years at Mercy General Hospital. 28 years of 12-hour shifts. 28 years of IVs and vital signs and holding the hands of people who were afraid. She had watched people come back from the edge of death and she had watched others go over it, and she had learned to carry both without crumbling. You had to. The job required it. She hung the uniform on the back of the pantry door and moved to the counter, where 4 sandwich bags sat waiting. She packed her lunch the same way she did everything, quietly, efficiently, without any fuss. Turkey on wheat, the mustard on the side because the bread got soggy otherwise. An apple she probably wouldn't eat. 2 packets of crackers from the bottom of the cabinet. Small things. Practical things. Delia had built her entire life out of small, practical things. She caught her reflection in the dark window above the sink. She looked at it only for a second, just long enough to see the tiredness sitting under her eyes like something that had moved in and wasn't planning to leave. She was 52, and she knew that 52 had a look to it. She accepted that. What she tried not to think about too hard was the other things. The way her hair had started thinning at the temples, coming out in soft clumps on her pillowcase every morning. The way her fingernails had gone brittle as old paper, breaking at the edges for no reason she could name. The tingling in her feet that came and went. The fog that settled over her thoughts some afternoons like a curtain dropping. 3 doctors in 18 months. 3 different explanations. Menopause. Said the first one, not unkindly, just quickly. Stress. Said the second one, checking his watch. It's just part of getting older, Delia. Said the third one, in a tone that was almost gentle and was somehow worse for it. She had believed them. All 3. She had nodded and collected her pamphlets about calcium supplements and sleep hygiene, and she had driven herself home and gone back to work the next day. Because what else do you do when 3 different doctors tell you that what you're feeling is just what your body does now? You accept it. You push through. That was what she knew how to do. Raymond appeared in the kitchen doorway at 5:40, the way he always did. He was still handsome in a broad, settled way, gray threading through his temples, the kind of face that photographed well at cookouts and church anniversaries. He moved through the kitchen like a man who knew he was welcome in it, which he was. She had made sure of that for 24 years. "Morning," he said. Not to her exactly. More toward her. The way you'd greet a piece of furniture you'd grown fond of. "Morning," she said back. He went straight for the cabinet above the stove. The one with the herbal tea. The clay pot he'd bought 3 years ago, deep red with a lid that sat just slightly crooked, sat waiting on the counter where he'd left it the night before. He had started this ritual a month after their 21st anniversary. Something to help with your energy, baby. I read about it. and their neighbor Carol had cooed about it at the next block party. Raymond makes Delia tea every single morning, isn't that the sweetest thing? And it had become part of how people understood them as a couple. Raymond. So thoughtful. Delia watched him work while she pulled on her cardigan. He steeped the tea with his back to her, the water just off the boil. He was particular about the time, always let it sit for exactly 4 minutes. He had a routine for it, a rhythm. He never measured the herbs out in front of her. Everything was already prepared when the kettle finished. He poured it into her travel mug, the green one she'd had since forever, and set it on the table in front of her. "Drink it while it's hot," he said. She wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth moved through her palms. She drank. He stood by the counter with his own mug of black coffee and watched her the way he always watched her, with a small, composed smile that she had spent 2 decades reading as affection. She had never once seen him take a single sip of the tea. Not once. She finished half the mug and set it down. Raymond picked up his phone. The moment passed, the way all their mornings passed, quietly, without incident. Delia picked up her bag and her lunch. "Have a good day," he said, still looking at his phone. "You too," she said. She walked out the door into the bruise-colored morning, already tired, already thinking about her first patient. She did not think about the tea. Not yet. The examination room at Dr. Price's office smelled like antiseptic and lavender, a combination Delia had always found oddly comforting, the way only a nurse could. She sat on the crinkled paper of the examination table in her cloth gown, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. She had almost canceled this appointment. 3 times, actually. Once because her shift ran over, once because she was tired, and once because Raymond had looked up from his dinner plate 2 nights ago and said, "You're always convinced something's wrong with you," in a tone that was almost bored. She had picked up her fork and said nothing and thought, maybe he's right. She had thought that about a lot of things Raymond said. It was a habit she'd built so slowly she hadn't noticed the weight of it until it was already load-bearing. But she'd kept the appointment. Some stubborn, quiet part of her had insisted on it. That part didn't speak loudly. It just held on. Dr. Yvonne Price had been Delia's doctor for 15 years. She was 61, small in frame, but large in presence. The kind of woman who moved through a room like she had already read the room and found it acceptable. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and kept her gray locks pinned back when she was working. She spoke in full sentences and made eye contact, and never once looked at the door while Delia was talking. Delia trusted her the way she trusted very few people. Quietly. Completely. When Dr. Price came in, she greeted Delia the way she always did, a warm squeeze of her hand, a real question about how she was sleeping. Then she settled onto her stool, opened the chart on her tablet, and went still in the way that meant she was actually reading, and not just scanning. The silence stretched. Delia had spent 28 years in medical settings. She knew the difference between a doctor who was quiet because they were moving through a checklist, and a doctor who was quiet because something had stopped them. Dr. Price had gone very, very quiet. She was flipping back, further than the last visit, further than the one before. Delia watched her eyes track across the screen and felt the first small thread of unease pull loose somewhere behind her sternum. "Your weight is down again, Doctor," Price said, not looking up yet. 9 pounds since last year. I figured that was the fatigue. I don't have much appetite. She kept reading. "And the hair loss is still ongoing." "Yes, ma'am. I've been keeping it covered at work." The peripheral tingling, feet and hands. "Comes and goes. Mostly evenings." Dr. Price looked up then. Her expression was arranged carefully, but Delia had spent too many years in clinical settings to miss the thing underneath the arrangement. It was the look of a person who had just found something they were hoping they wouldn't find. "Let me just..." She set down the tablet and turned toward the door. "Give me 1 moment." She stepped into the hall. Through the door, Delia heard her say something to the nurse. Brief, quiet, the tone you used when you were moving something off the schedule. A minute later, she came back in. Alone. She didn't return to her stool behind the desk. She pulled the chair from the corner, the plain one, the one for family members, and set it directly in front of Delia, close enough that their knees were almost touching. She sat down. She folded her hands. Delia. Her voice was low and even. I need to ask you something, and I need you to stay calm while I do. Delia's hands tightened in her lap. Okay. Is anyone in your home giving you supplements? Vitamins, minerals, herbal teas? Anything like that on a regular basis? The question landed like something dropped from a height. Raymond? Delia said. The word came out automatic. He makes me an herbal tea every morning. He's done it for about 3 years now. Dr. Price's face did something small and terrible. It wasn't dramatic. No sharp intake of breath, no wide eyes. It was more like a door quietly closing behind a decision that had already been made. Her jaw settled. Her expression went still in a different way than before. I'm going to run some additional blood work today, she said. And I'm referring you to a specialist. I want you seen before the end of the week. I'm going to tell the front desk this is a priority follow-up. She paused. I also need you to not mention to Raymond that you came in today. Can you do that? The thread of unease had become something heavier, something with mass. Yvonne. Delia's voice was barely above a whisper. What are you seeing in that chart? Dr. Price held her gaze for a long moment. Then she leaned forward in that plain corner chair, close enough that Delia could see the small gold cross at her collarbone, and she lowered her voice to almost nothing. Don't drink the tea. Delia pulled into her driveway at 4:22 p.m. She did not get out of the car. The garage door was closed. Raymond's truck was gone, still at work. The house sat quiet and ordinary in the late afternoon light, the hanging ferns on the porch swaying slightly in the warm Georgia breeze, the welcome mat centered perfectly at the front door, the way she always kept it. She sat. The car engine ticked as it cooled. A neighbor's dog barked twice, then stopped. The sky through the windshield was going soft and gold at the edges. She sat for 40 minutes and she did not move. Delia got out of the car at 5:03 p.m. She did not storm. She did not sit on the porch steps and press her hands to her face. She stood up from the driver's seat, smoothed the front of her scrubs, picked up her bag from the passenger seat, and walked to the front door the way she had walked to it 10,000 times before. Her key slid into the lock. The door opened. The house smelled like the plug-in air freshener in the hallway, brown sugar and vanilla. And the television was going in the den. A sports recap, the volume too loud, the way Raymond always kept it. Hey, she called out. Hey. His voice floated back from the other room. Easy, unbothered. She hung her keys on the hook. She set her bag on the chair by the door. She walked to the kitchen and got herself a glass of water and drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the backyard, where the last of the evening light was cutting long shadows across the grass. Her hands were completely still. That surprised her, somewhere in the back of her mind. She had expected her body to betray her. A tremor, a catch in her throat, something. But her hands were still and her voice had come out even. And the part of her brain that had kept people alive in emergency rooms for 28 years had simply taken over, quiet and businesslike, the way it always did when things got serious. She watched the shadows in the backyard and she let it do its work. She ran the shower that night before bed. While the water heated, she stood at the bathroom sink with the mug Raymond had set out for the morning. He always prepared things the night before, measured the herbs into a small cloth pouch, left the mug ready on the counter, and she poured it out. The liquid spiraled brown and fragrant into the drain. She rinsed the mug. She filled it with plain water and set it back exactly where he had left it. Then she stepped into the shower and she stood under the hot water and she thought. She thought about the peripheral tingling in her feet, which she had attributed to long shifts, to being on her feet, to 52 years of living in a body that was tired. She thought about the hair loss, which 3 different doctors had attributed to hormonal changes. She thought about the nausea that came and went without pattern, the brain fog that she had started calling her senior moments as a joke, as if naming it something funny would make it easier to carry. She thought about what she knew about arsenic. She had learned it the same way she had learned most things, in continuing education modules, in textbooks, in the accumulated knowledge of nearly 3 decades in clinical settings. Chronic low-dose arsenic poisoning did not look like a murder mystery. It looked like getting older. It looked like menopause. It looked like stress. It caused fatigue and hair loss and brittle nails and GI disturbances and peripheral neuropathy and a long, slow systemic decline that was very easy to explain away if you were looking for explanations. If you were a 52-year-old black woman in America, people handed you those explanations freely and expected you to be grateful for them. She turned off the shower. She dried off. She went to bed beside Raymond Washington and she closed her eyes, and her chest rose and fell steadily in the dark. She watched him on day 2. She had always been an early riser, so it wasn't unusual for her to be in the kitchen before 6. What was unusual, what she made sure did not look unusual, was where she stood. She had moved to the far counter, near the refrigerator, under the pretense of looking for something in the cabinet above it. From there, she had a clear sight line to the stove where Raymond stood with his back to her preparing her tea. She watched him reach into his jacket pocket. Not the cabinet. His jacket hung on the back of the kitchen chair where he always left it the night before. He pulled out a small amber bottle, the kind with a dropper cap, like the essential oil bottles her co-worker kept in her locker, but darker and smaller. He tipped several drops into the cloth herb pouch before dropping it into the hot water. He did not look over his shoulder. He had no reason to. She had been standing in this kitchen for 24 years, and she had never given him a reason to look over his shoulder. That had always been something she was proud of. She understood now what it had actually been. She said nothing. She took her mug, and she thanked him and she drank water while he ate his eggs. That afternoon, while Raymond showered before his afternoon shift, she went to the jacket on the kitchen chair. The bottle was gone. She checked the breast pocket. Nothing. She checked the inside pocket. There. Her hands were still as she photographed it with her phone. 3 photographs from different angles. She put it back. She moved to the other room before the shower cut off. That evening, she opened their joint checking account on her phone. She scrolled back 24 months. The withdrawals started in March of the previous year. Cash. Always cash. Always between $300 and $500. Every 2 to 3 weeks, regular as a prescription refill. No notes in the memo field. No pattern she could attach to any bill she recognized. She photographed the screen. On day 5, she was in the break room at work when her phone buzzed. Dr. Price. She stepped into the hallway, where it was quieter, and picked up. Delia. Dr. Price's voice was careful and low. The specialist has the results. The blood work confirms arsenic exposure. Chronic. At levels consistent with repeated deliberate ingestion over an extended period. This is not environmental. This is not incidental. A beat of silence. I've already been in contact with the authorities. I'm a mandatory reporter and I had no choice, and I want you to know that I made sure they understood the full picture before I did. Delia leaned her back against the hallway wall. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. Somewhere down the corridor, a cart wheeled past, its wheels squeaking on the linoleum. Okay, she said. Are you all right? She thought about it honestly. I don't know yet. That's fair, Dr. Price said. That's a fair answer. At 3:47 p.m., a co-worker found Delia in the break room, sitting in the plastic chair by the window, watching her phone. She didn't look up when Marla came in. She didn't explain why she was sitting so still in the middle of a shift. Then her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. 4 words. It's done. He's in. She set the phone face down on the table. She breathed in. Slow. Her chest expanded in a way it hadn't in longer than she could remember. No tightness in the upper ribs, no shallow ceiling she kept bumping against. The air went all the way down. She breathed out. The break room was ordinary around her. The coffee maker beeped. The fluorescent light above the sink flickered once, the way it always did. Outside the window, the hospital parking lot sat gray and still in the late afternoon. She sat in it all, the ordinary, the fluorescent, the gray, and for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe all the way through her nose. She waited until Marla left. The break room emptied in the way rooms do when people sense something private is happening and aren't sure whether to stay or go. Delia helped them decide by not looking up. One by one they peeled away, a hand on the doorframe, a quiet "let us know if you need anything," until the room was just her and the coffee maker and the flickering light above the sink. She picked up her phone. Gloria picked up on the second ring. Hey you, I was just thinking about… Glor. Delia's voice was even. Raymond was arrested this afternoon. Arsenic poisoning. Mine. He's been putting it in my tea. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds. Delia counted them. I'm coming, Gloria said. No questions. No, are you sure? Or, oh my God, or what do you mean? Just, I'm coming. You don't have to tonight. I'm coming tonight. Her voice had gone flat and quiet in the way it did when Gloria was furious and choosing not to perform it. I'll be there by 8. Don't open the door for anyone else. She hung up before Delia could answer. Delia sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Something in her chest, some small, wound-tight thing, loosened by a fraction. The second call was to Beverly Okafor. The referral had come 3 weeks ago from a colleague in the oncology ward. If you ever need a family law attorney, and I hope you never do, call Beverly. And Delia had written the number in the back of her paper planner in pencil, the way she wrote things she hoped she'd never need. Beverly answered her own phone, which Delia had not expected. Beverly Okafor. My name is Delia Washington. My husband was arrested today for poisoning me. A colleague referred me, Sandra Cole, from Mercy General. Delia paused. I need an attorney. A brief silence. Not uncertainty. The silence of someone shifting fully into focus. Are you safe right now? Yes. Is he out on bail? Not yet. I don't know when. Then we have a window. Beverly's voice was crisp and unhurried. Can you be at my office at 8 tomorrow morning? I'll clear my schedule. Yes. Bring everything you have. Financial records, photographs, anything you've documented. Don't move money. Don't post anything. And don't talk to anyone about the details except your sister or whoever is staying with you tonight. Delia blinked. How did you know someone was staying with me? Because you're smart enough to call an attorney, Beverly said simply. 8 o'clock. The third call was the one she had been putting at the back of the line. Terrence picked up on the 4th ring, his voice carrying the particular distraction of a young man interrupted mid-evening. Hey, Mama. What's up? Hey, baby. She kept her voice gentle. I need to tell you something. Your father was arrested today. Silence. For what? For poisoning me. There's arsenic in my blood work, Terrence. It's been there for a while. The doctors traced it and… Mama. His voice shifted. Not toward her. Away. Daddy wouldn't do that. I know this is hard to hear. He loves you. He talks about you all the time. Terrence stopped, regrouped. When he spoke again, he sounded almost gentle in the way someone sounds when they are trying to be patient with a person they believe is mistaken. You always make things bigger than they are. You know that. You get scared and you… Okay, baby, Delia said. Mama, okay. Her voice didn't waver. I love you. We'll talk soon. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her lap and she looked at the wall across from her. Beige, a small laminated poster about hand washing. And she felt the shape of what her son had just said settle into her, like something she would sort through later, when she had the room for it. She filed it away. Not to forget. To hold until she was ready. Gloria arrived at 7:53 with a rolling suitcase, a covered dish of something that smelled like garlic and butter, and the expression of a woman who had been right about something for 24 years and was not going to say so. She came in, set down the dish, and hugged Delia for a long time without speaking. They ate at the kitchen table. Pasta with chicken, warm bread, sweet tea that Gloria had made herself from a mix she'd brought in her bag. Delia ate a full plate, then most of a second. She hadn't eaten like that, without nausea, without the low-grade wrongness that had become her body's baseline, in longer than she could easily name. I'm not leaving, Delia said. The house. I'm not going anywhere. Gloria looked at her across the table. Good. This is my house too. I'm not going to let him take that from me on top of everything else. Good, Gloria said again. She refilled Delia's glass without being asked. They stayed at the table until almost midnight, talking about nothing urgent. Gloria's Neighbor, a TV show, a memory from when they were girls. The ordinary kind of talking that is really just two people keeping each other company in the dark. At 12:14, Delia locked the front door. She reset the alarm. New code. 4 digits Raymond had never known. and checked the back door, and then she walked down the hall to the bedroom. She pulled back the covers, and she got in. Not to one side. Not to the edge where she had slept for 24 years, compacted and careful, taking up as little space as possible. She laid down in the center of the bed. She pulled the covers up to her chin. She closed her eyes. Beverly Okafor's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. The elevator was slow. Delia didn't mind. She stood inside it with her folder pressed against her chest, and she breathed. The folder held 31 pages. She had printed them the night before at the kitchen table while Gloria slept, the printer humming quietly in the dark. Bank statements. Screenshots of the account activity, dated and organized by month. 7 photographs she had taken on her phone: the amber bottle, the jacket pocket, the kitchen counter, Raymond's hand near the teapot. She had arranged them in order. She had paper-clipped each section. It was the most organized she had felt in 3 years. Beverly was already at her desk when the assistant showed Delia in. She stood and reached across to shake Delia's hand, firm, brief, professional, and gestured to the chair across from her. The office was neat and deliberate, law books on shelves that actually looked red, a framed photo on the credenza, turned slightly away, a mahogany desk that was wide enough to spread a case across and solid enough to mean it. Beverly sat down and opened a legal pad. "Let's see what you brought." Delia placed the folder on the desk and slid it across. Beverly didn't rush. She worked through each section the way a surgeon works, methodically, without commentary, pausing occasionally to make a note or hold a page closer to the window light. She asked 2 clarifying questions. She did not react to the photographs. When she finished, she set the folder down and looked at Delia. "This is good," she said. "This is very good. I want to tell you what I'm going to do next, and I want to tell you what I already found this morning." Delia folded her hands in her lap. "All right." Beverly had already started pulling records the moment she'd hung up the phone the evening before. That was simply how she worked. She did not wait for the morning meeting to begin the morning's work. What she had found, and now laid out for Delia across that mahogany desk with the quiet precision of someone who had delivered this kind of news before, was this. 18 months ago, a $750,000 life insurance policy had been taken out on Delia Ann Washington. The policyholder was Raymond Earl Washington. The sole name beneficiary was Raymond Earl Washington. Delia's signature appeared on the application. Beverly slid the document across the desk and tapped a line near the bottom. "That's not your signature." Delia looked at it. She looked for a long time. She had signed her name hundreds of thousands of times, on patient charts and medication logs and tax forms and birthday cards. She knew the exact way her capital D looped and where her hand lifted between the A and the N. The signature on that line borrowed the shape of her name, the way a copy borrows color, present but wrong, flat where it should have moved, careful where she was always quick. "No," she said, "it's not." Beverly moved to the next page. The policy carries a 2-year contestability window, meaning if you died within 2 years of the policy being issued, the insurance company would investigate the claim before paying out. She paused. "You are currently 16 months in." The room was very quiet. "He had a deadline," Delia said. She didn't say it loudly. She said it the way you say something when the last piece of a thing finally fits into place, and you almost wish it hadn't. "He had a deadline," Beverly confirmed. "And the cash withdrawals you documented." She tapped the bank statements. "I've had a paralegal cross-referencing those amounts and intervals against purchase records we can subpoena. The pattern is consistent with someone buying small quantities of arsenic-based rodenticide from multiple locations over an extended period. 3 different farm supply stores, we believe. Small enough amounts at each one to avoid raising flags. Spread across enough time to look like nothing." Delia thought about Raymond's hands around the teapot every morning. Patient, deliberate, already knowing how it would end. She did not raise her voice. She did not move from the chair. She looked at the papers on the desk, and she felt something inside her go very, very still. "He looked at me," she said quietly, almost to herself, more to herself than to Beverly. Every morning for 3 years. And he already knew. Beverly didn't fill the silence. She had the good sense to let it sit. After a moment, Delia looked up. Her eyes were clear and her voice was steady. "Can we use this in the civil case?" Beverly smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had chosen exactly the right client. "We can use every piece of it." Delia took the elevator back down alone. She walked across the parking lot in the morning sun, and she got into her car and she closed the door. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands. And then, alone inside that small quiet space, with no one watching and no one to hold herself together for, she let the fury come. It moved through her chest like a current, hot and electric and entirely her own. Not tears, not collapse. Just the clean, contained rage of a woman who now understood exactly what had been done to her, and exactly how long it had taken, and exactly how certain he had been that she would never know. She sat with it. She let herself feel every degree of it. Then she started the car. The call came at 8:14 in the morning. Delia was at Gloria's kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Real coffee, not tea. She hadn't touched tea since the driveway. When her phone buzzed against the wood. Unknown number. Georgia area code. She picked up. "Is this Delia Washington?" The voice was a woman's. Careful. Like someone who had rehearsed the first sentence and wasn't sure about the second. "It is," Delia said. A pause. "My name is Paulette. I'm Raymond's sister." Another pause. Shorter. "His youngest sister. We haven't spoken in... It's been a long time. I heard what happened. I heard about the arrest." Her voice didn't waver, but it tightened. "I have something you need to hear. I need to say it in person. I don't want to say it on the phone." Delia looked across the kitchen at Gloria, who had stopped moving at the counter. "When can you come?" Delia asked. Paulette arrived 2 hours later. She was a small woman, solid through the shoulders, with Raymond's same deep brown complexion, and none of his ease. She had the look of someone who had spent years carrying something heavy, and had learned to walk straight under it anyway. She wore a gray cardigan and flat shoes, and she stood at Gloria's front door with her purse held in front of her with both hands, like a shield. Gloria let her in without ceremony. She poured coffee without being asked. The three of them sat at the kitchen table. Morning light came through the window over the sink and lay flat across the wood between them. Paulette looked at Delia for a long moment before she spoke. "I need you to know I'm not here to defend him," she said. "I stopped defending Raymond a long time ago." "All right," Delia said. Paulette set her mug down. Before Raymond married you, he had a wife, Corinne. They were married for 9 years. She died 11 years ago. She was 44. She said each fact, like she was placing stones on a table, one by one, making sure they landed. The death certificate said cardiac event. Her heart. That's what everybody was told. That's what everybody accepted. Gloria had gone still in her chair. Corinne's last few months. Paulette stopped. Pressed her lips together. Started again. Her last several months she was sick. Tired all the time. Losing her hair. She had stomach problems that came and went. She saw her doctor and they told her stress. They told her she needed to slow down. Paulette's jaw tightened. Raymond had started making her morning drinks. He said it was to help her. Vitamins, herbs. He was very attentive about it. Very particular. He never let her fix them herself. The words landed in the kitchen like a stone dropped into still water. Delia did not move. She felt the ripple go through her anyway. "I didn't have proof," Paulette said. "I want you to understand that. I had nothing but what I saw with my own eyes and what my gut told me, and nobody wanted to hear it. Not the family. Not the investigators. They looked at me like I was a grieving woman who needed someone to blame." She looked down at her mug. "Maybe they were right. Maybe I needed someone to blame. But I don't think so. I have never thought so." "You weren't wrong," Delia said. Paulette looked up. "You weren't wrong," Delia said again, quietly. "I believe you." Something shifted in Paulette's face. Not relief exactly. Something older than relief. The expression of a person who has been holding the same truth for 15 years and has finally been allowed to set it down. "Corinne had a daughter," Paulette said. "From before Raymond. Her name is Tamara. She's in her 30s now. She lives over in Macon." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a phone number written in blue ink, in handwriting that was careful and deliberate. She never believed it was just her heart. She just didn't have anywhere to take it. Delia took the paper. She smoothed it flat on the table with her thumb. "Thank you," she said. Paulette nodded once. She looked like she might say something else, then didn't. Some things didn't need more words than that. Delia called Tamara that afternoon from Gloria's back porch. The conversation was not easy. It was not supposed to be easy. Delia laid out what she knew in plain, careful language: the arsenic, the tea, the timeline, the pattern. And she made no promises she couldn't keep. She did not tell Tamara what to feel. She only told her what she knew and what was possible, and that she would not be acting alone if Tamara chose to come forward. Tamara was quiet for a long time after Delia finished. Then she said, "She wasn't sick before him." "I know," Delia said. "She was healthy, she was strong." Her voice cracked once, clean, like a branch under weight. "I always knew." They agreed to cooperate. Tamara would speak to investigators. Delia would make the introduction. She called Detective Morris on her case that same evening, still sitting on the porch while the last of the daylight faded from the yard. She told him about Paulette. She told him about Corinne. She told him about Tamara and gave him the number. She gave him Paulette's number too, and told him Paulette had been waiting 15 years for someone to call it. Detective Morris asked 2 questions and then went quiet in a way that told Delia he understood exactly what she was handing him. "I'll be making some calls tomorrow morning," he said. "Corinne Washington's case is going to be referred for formal re-examination." "All right," Delia said. "Mrs. Washington, this matters. What you just did matters." She thanked him. She hung up. She sat at Gloria's kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood in front of her, and she looked at the window and the dark beyond it. She had come into this fighting to save her own life. She understood now that she was doing something larger than that. Terrence knocked at 2 in the afternoon. Delia saw him through the narrow window beside Gloria's front door before she opened it. He was standing on the porch with his hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders up around his ears, the way he'd stood as a boy when he'd done something wrong and hadn't figured out yet how to say so. He was 29 years old, and he looked, in that moment, about 16. She opened the door. "Mama." He said it like an apology that hadn't fully formed yet. "Come in," she said. She brought him to the kitchen table. Not the living room, not the couch, the table where things got handled. She heard Gloria's bedroom door close softly down the hall. Present, but out of the way. That was Gloria's particular gift. Terrence sat down and looked around the kitchen like he was taking inventory. The coffee maker, the dish rack, the stack of folders on the counter that were none of his business. He was avoiding her eyes. "Daddy bonded out this morning," he said. "I know. Mama, he's not doing good. He's really not doing good." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "His attorney thinks if you'd just agree to talk to him. Not about the case, just talk. It might help things calm down. He's not well. That's what his attorney is saying, that he wasn't in his right mind, that he was trying to help you and it went wrong somehow, that he—" "Terrence." Her voice was even, not cold, even. "I hear you." He stopped. She stood up and went to the counter. She picked up 3 documents separately and brought them back to the table. She set them down one at a time, in a row, like she was dealing cards. First, the insurance policy. 8 pages, tabbed at the signature line. Second, a copy of their joint tax return from 3 years ago, her signature at the bottom. Third, the toxicology report. 12 pages. The summary paragraph on the first page was highlighted in yellow. She sat back down across from him. "Look at all 3, she said. "Take your time." Terrence looked at her first. She kept her face still and waited. He looked down. He started with the insurance policy. She watched his eyes move across the first page, slow, then stop at the signature block. He looked at her name. He looked at it for a long time. Then he pulled the tax return toward him and held it next to the policy. He was quiet for almost 2 full minutes. The kitchen was very still. Outside, a car passed on the street. She knew what he was seeing. The signature on the policy was close. Raymond was careful. He had always been careful, but it tilted left in a way Delia's handwriting never did. Her real signature ran level, the D looping back on itself in a way that was hers and had always been hers. The forgery was a performance of her signature, not the real thing. Terrence set both documents down. He picked up the toxicology report. He read the highlighted paragraph once, then again. His jaw worked. He hadn't said a word in 4 minutes. Then Delia's work cell rang. Blocked number. She looked at the screen. Looked at Terrence, who was still staring at the report. She stood and turned slightly toward the window and answered. Hello. Delia. Raymond's voice, smooth and careful, the voice he used when he'd already decided what the conversation was going to be. I know you're upset. I need you to listen to me. What I was giving you, those weren't harmful supplements. I was trying to help your health. You know how you never take care of yourself, and I was trying to. She had already opened the voice recording app with her thumb. She held the phone steady. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding, Raymond continued. The doctor panicked, and now the whole thing is blown up into something it isn't. Baby, I love you. I have loved you for 24 years. I would never. I have to go, she said. Calm. No edge in it at all. She ended the call. She forwarded the recording to Detective Morris, then to Beverly. She set the phone face down on the table. She turned back to Terrence. He was still sitting there. He hadn't moved, hadn't gone for the door, hadn't said anything to fill the silence. The 3 documents were still spread out in front of him, and he was staring at them like they were a language he'd just realized he'd been able to read all along. His face had changed. She couldn't have described exactly how. It was something around the eyes, something open that had been closed, or something closed that had finally opened. Whatever it was not a thing that could be put back the way it was. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Terrence looked up at her. His voice came out quieter than she'd heard it in years. Can I stay for dinner? Delia looked at her son. She nodded once. I'll start something now, she said, and she went to the kitchen. The courtroom smelled like old wood and central air conditioning, and the particular stillness of a room where serious things happen to people. Delia walked in at 8:53 in the morning, 7 minutes before the session opened. She wore a dark navy suit, the one she had bought 14 months ago with a paycheck she'd deposited into an account Raymond had never known existed. She had worn it to exactly one other event. Beverly's office on the morning she signed the civil complaint. It fit her well. She had bought it in her own size, which was a thing she had not always done. She took her seat behind the prosecution table and folded her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead. Raymond was already seated at the defense table across the aisle. She had prepared herself for this moment. She looked at him once, directly, and then she did not look at him again. The prosecution spent 3 days building its case from the ground up. Dr. Price testified first. She spoke in precise, measured terms about the blood work. 3 years of panels, laid side by side, a pattern of accumulation that she described to the jury as not consistent with environmental exposure or dietary factors, but consistent with repeated, deliberate ingestion over an extended period of time. She kept her hands folded on the edge of the witness box. She did not embellish. She did not need to. The toxicologist came next. She identified the specific arsenic compound, a trivalent form found in a class of rodenticide that had been sold, in small quantities, at 3 different farm supply stores across 2 counties. The purchases had been made in cash. The purchases had been spaced out, 2 to 5 weeks apart, over an 18-month window. The toxicologist explained, slowly and clearly enough for every juror to follow, that this spacing was not consistent with accidental purchase or ignorant use. It was consistent with management, with control. The insurance fraud investigator testified about the policy. The forged signature. She placed Delia's real signature, from 3 separate authenticated documents, side by side with the signature on the policy application, and walked the jury through 8 specific points of divergence. The leftward tilt, the interrupted loop in the D, the way the authentic signature grounded itself at the baseline in a way the forgery did not. Raymond's attorney, a gray-haired man named Colton, who had the demeanor of someone used to winning on technicalities, mounted a defense that could be summarized simply. Raymond Washington was a devoted husband. He had been administering herbal supplements he believed to be beneficial. He was a man of ordinary education who could not reasonably be expected to identify an arsenic compound by its chemical name. This was, at its heart, a tragedy of misplaced care. Colton said the words devoted husband 11 times in his opening argument. Delia counted. She took the stand on the 4th day of testimony. She smoothed her skirt before she sat. She placed her hands flat on the railing in front of her. She looked at the prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Reeves who wore the same pair of small gold earrings every day of the trial and spoke to witnesses like she trusted them to tell the truth. "Ms. Washington," Sandra began, "can you describe your professional background?" "Licensed practical nurse. 28 years at the same hospital system. I worked in medical surgical, then in the emergency department for the last 16 years. And in that capacity, have you encountered cases of heavy metal toxicity?" "Yes. Occupational exposure cases, accidental poisonings. I've assisted with the care of 4 patients with arsenic toxicity over the course of my career. Did you recognize your own symptoms as consistent with arsenic poisoning?" Delia paused. Not because she didn't know the answer, because the answer deserved the pause it had taken her 52 years to arrive at. "I recognize them," she said. "I told myself I was being dramatic." The courtroom was very quiet. Sandra walked her through Raymond's professional history next. His 15 years as a facilities manager at an industrial processing plant. His annual safety certifications. His signature, she had the documents, on material safety data sheets for 16 different chemical compounds, including 2 arsenic-based agents used in pest control at the facility. "He signs those sheets every year," Delia said. "That's a legal acknowledgement that he has read and understood the hazard information, the toxicity levels, the symptoms of exposure, the long-term health effects." She looked at the jury. She said it plainly, without heat, the way she had said 1,000 true things to 1,000 patients who needed to hear them clearly. "My husband knew exactly what he was giving me." Colton's cross-examination lasted 40 minutes. He suggested she had misremembered, that grief and betrayal had colored her interpretation of events, that a devoted man of ordinary means couldn't be expected to. "I've answered that," Delia said each time. Calm, patient, immovable. He sat down. Raymond did not testify. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with 3 verdicts: guilty, attempted murder, guilty, insurance fraud, guilty, forgery. The judge, before sentencing, referenced the ongoing investigation into Corinne Washington's death, the exhumed remains, the arsenic found preserved in her hair, and called Raymond's conduct what the evidence showed it to be: predatory, systematic, and performed without a trace of remorse across more than a decade. 22 years. Raymond did not react visibly when the sentence was read. He sat the way he had sat through the entire trial, still, composed, performing a version of dignity. Delia had expected this. It was the only thing he had left. She stood when the judge rose. She gathered her bag. She walked out of the courtroom without looking at the defense table, without pausing in the hallway where the cameras had gathered, without stopping for a single question. The afternoon sun hit her face at the top of the courthouse steps, warm, direct, without apology. Beverly was waiting at the curb with the car already running. Delia walked down the steps and got in, and they drove away. The conference room on the 14th floor of Beverly's building had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. It was a clear morning, the kind of clear that felt earned. Delia sat to Beverly's left. She wore the navy suit again. She had considered wearing something else, and then decided against it. The suit had been present for every consequential moment of the past 14 months. It could be present for this one too. Raymond's civil attorney sat across the table. His name was Garrett Wills. He was younger than Colton, the defense attorney from the criminal trial, and he carried himself with the careful energy of a man who had reviewed the file and already knew today was not going to go well for his client. Raymond himself was represented remotely, a small rectangle in the corner of a laptop screen that Garrett had positioned at the far end of the table. The image was dim. The connection was poor. Raymond's face was visible but small, the way it would look to someone who had stopped thinking about him as important. Delia glanced at the screen once when she sat down. Then she looked at Beverly. Beverly opened the folder in front of her. "We're pursuing full marital estate," Beverly said. No preamble, no warm-up, just the facts, arranged in order. Under Georgia law, the deliberate use of marital assets to fund a criminal enterprise against a spouse constitutes financial abuse. Raymond used money from their joint account to purchase the arsenic compounds used in the poisoning. He used marital funds to secure the fraudulent insurance application. Both of those actions are documented, itemized, and tied to specific transactions. She slid a single sheet across the table. "This is the figure." Garrett looked at the paper. He was quiet for 23 seconds. Delia counted, not because she was anxious, but because she had learned, in emergency rooms, in courtrooms, in kitchens, that silence had weight, and she wanted to feel the full weight of this one. "This includes the pension," Garrett said finally, "and the retirement accounts, and the equity in the home." Beverly's voice was pleasant. "All of it." Garrett looked at the laptop screen. Some silent exchange happened. Then he looked back at Beverly. "We'd like to propose the number on that sheet," Beverly said, "is not a starting point." Another silence. Shorter this time. Garrett reached for his pen. The signing took 11 minutes. Beverly's paralegal witnessed it. Delia sat still through all of it, her hands folded in her lap, watching the pages turn. When the last one was done, Garrett closed his folder and stood and shook Beverly's hand with the tight, efficient grip of a man who was already thinking about his next case. He did not extend his hand to Delia. She didn't need him to. When the door closed behind him, Beverly set both palms flat on the table and let out a slow breath through her nose. "Done," Beverly said. Delia nodded. She looked out the window at the clear city below. Then she picked up her bag, thanked Beverly, genuinely the way she thanked people who had done something real, and walked out to the elevator alone. In the parking garage, she sat in her car for exactly 2 minutes. She did not cry. She let the quiet settle around her like something she had built, and was now allowed to stand inside. Then she drove across town to meet Corinne's daughter. Her name was Maya. She was 36, and she had her mother's eyes. That was what Paulette had told Delia, and Delia saw it immediately when Maya stood up from the corner booth at the back of the restaurant, wide-set, watchful, the eyes of someone who had spent a long time looking for something they couldn't name. They ordered coffee. Delia waited until the server walked away. She told Maya about the civil settlement first. Then she told her what the medical examiner's findings from the exhumation had confirmed. She said it plainly, the way she delivered hard news, directly, without softening it so much that it lost its shape. Maya looked at the table. Her hands were wrapped around her mug. She did not speak for several minutes. Delia did not rush her. She understood what it felt like to sit with a thing that had always been true and was only now being confirmed. When Maya finally looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was level. "I always knew," she said. "I couldn't prove it, but I knew." "I know," Delia said. "Thank you." Maya's voice broke slightly on the word. "I don't know how to." "You don't have to thank me." Delia's voice was quiet and firm. "I just refused to let him do to somebody else what he did to the two of us." Maya nodded slowly. She pressed her lips together. She breathed. They stayed at that table for another hour. They talked about Corinne, and about the second trial, and about things that were harder to name, the particular loneliness of not being believed, and what it meant to finally be. Before they left, they exchanged numbers. They agreed to stay in contact. Neither of them said what this was yet, but both of them felt it. Something beginning, in the place where a long loss had finally been acknowledged. Delia drove home in the early evening, when the light was going gold and flat across the Georgia roads. The house looked the same from the outside. It always had. She pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at it. Then she went inside, changed out of the navy suit and into soft cotton pants and an old cardigan she had not worn in years, because Raymond had said it made her look sloppy. And she went out to the back porch and sat down as the sun went below the tree line. The yard was quiet. The air smelled like cut grass, and something sweet she couldn't place. She sat there until it was dark. 2 years had a way of changing the light. Delia noticed it first in the garden. the way the morning sun came over the back fence now, unhurried, spreading flat and gold across the beds she had turned herself, the soil she had amended herself, the seeds she had chosen herself. Nobody's opinion consulted, nobody's preference factored in. Raymond had always said the garden was too much mess. Dirt tracked in on shoes, mulch blowing across the patio, the general disorder of growing things. She had let the beds go bare for years because of it. She had told herself she didn't mind. She minded. She was 54 now. Her hair was back, fuller than before, if she was honest, which she had decided to be about most things. She wore it natural on weekends, loose and unworried. She had on her good earrings. The gold hoops Raymond used to say were too much for a woman her age. She wore them to the garden on Saturday mornings because she felt like it, and that was the only reason she needed. The non-profit had taken most of the first year to build. She and Maya had done it together. The two of them at Delia's kitchen table with laptops and coffee, and the kind of focused energy that comes from women who have survived something specific. They called it the Corinne Project. Maya had wanted to name it after her mother. Delia had agreed immediately. The work was practical. That was what Delia insisted on from the beginning. Practical, not just meaningful. They partnered with 2 hospital systems in Georgia to develop intake protocols that flagged chronic symptom clusters in Black women over 40 for toxicology screening before attributing them to aging or stress. Delia consulted directly with hospitalists and OB/GYN departments, walking residents through case studies, sitting at the same kind of conference tables where decisions got made, and making sure the right questions were being asked. She was not intimidated by any of it. She never had been. She had just for a long time been too busy keeping everyone else alive to apply the same attention to herself. That had changed. Terrence came every Sunday. He brought the good bread from the bakery on Elm Street, and he stayed for 3 or 4 hours, and they ate and talked, and sometimes watched television without talking, which was its own kind of closeness. He was in therapy. He did not announce this as a virtue, which Delia appreciated. He just mentioned it the way you mention something true about your week. He had not visited Raymond. She had not asked him to explain that choice, and he had not offered to. Some things were still tender between them. She suspected they would be for a while. But he was present. He was paying attention. That was what she had asked of him, quietly, at the dinner table 2 years ago. He was doing it. That was enough to build on. Raymond was 59. He was serving his sentence in a state correctional facility 2 hours south of the city. The second trial, on Corinne's case, had a date now. His attorneys were working with what they had, which was very little. The arsenic found in Corinne's hair samples during the exhumation was not nothing. It was, in fact, quite a lot. He had no money. The civil settlement had seen to that. He had no visitors, according to Paulette, who kept quiet tabs on the situation without drama. His friends from the neighborhood, the cookout crowd, the men who shook his hand at church, had peeled away the way people do when there is nothing left to gain from proximity. Delia did not think about him often. When she did, it was briefly, the way you check on a thing that is contained and poses no further threat. Then she moved on. The nonprofit's first annual fundraiser had been held 6 weeks ago. Beverly came. Gloria came, in a dress she had bought specifically for the occasion, and mentioned 4 times. Maya stood at the entrance greeting people with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided that her mother's death would mean something. Dr. Yvonne Price was the keynote speaker. Delia sat in the 3rd row. She watched Yvonne stand at the podium, unhurried, as always, the way she had always been, and begin to speak. Yvonne told the story of a patient she had seen 7 years into practice, a woman whose numbers had troubled her, a woman who had been told by 3 doctors that what was happening to her body was simply age, simply stress, simply the ordinary cost of being a woman in her 50s. Yvonne did not say the patient's name. She described the moment she asked the nurse to leave the room, the chair she pulled close, the question she asked, and then the whisper, what she had said and why, and what it had required of her to say it. I was paying attention, Yvonne said. That is the entire story. I was paying attention. She looked at Delia when she said it. Delia looked back. She picked up her glass, sparkling water, a slice of lemon resting bright against the rim. and she drank. Now it was Saturday morning and the garden was waiting. She knelt in the soft dirt at the far bed, the one that got the most sun, and pressed seeds into the soil one by one. Zinnias along the border, tomatoes in the back row, sunflowers, because she had always loved them and never planted them. Her gold earrings caught the light when she leaned forward. Her knees were in the dirt. Her hands were dark with soil up to the wrist. She pressed each seed in with her thumb, gently, but with intention. Deep enough to hold, spaced exactly the way she wanted them. No one else's preferences considered. No one else's voice in her ear. She planted what she wanted. Nothing else. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.